So hello everyone, and thanks also to everyone to be here today. So I'm Inés Gutiérrez, as Cristina just said, and I'm part of the University Autonomous of Madrid, and within there we work at the Social Ecosystem Lab. And today in this small chat, I'm gonna talk about land stewardship agreements for the promotion of biodiversity in Spain and its relation with the value chain approach. So first of all, I'm going to do a reminding, a review of what are the land stewardship agreements and how do they work here in Spain. So land stewardship agreements are voluntary agreements between a landowner or a user and a land stewardship entity. And they need to agree on how to conserve and manage a specific territory, a specific area. So in this case, land users, or sometimes the owners, are the farmers or the seepers. So we are interested in contract in this specific case, when the landowners or the users are the farmers. And these kind of agreements are used here in Spain and in other territories as well, in territorial management as a strategy to involve the farmers in the conservation and in taking the decisions of how to better manage the land and how to use it in a more sustainable way. So as I mentioned, the stakeholders are from one part the farmers, and on the other hand are the land stewardship entities, which according to the Spanish law here they are considered, they have to be public or private, but non-profit organizations with the main goal of nature conservation. So it can be an environmental NGO, but it can also be a city council, for instance, or another kind of public body who is interested in managing the land in a sustainable way. So as I mentioned, the goal is the sustainable management to avoid biodiversity loss, but the key factor is that they need to involve the local actors. So important to highlight also that every single agreement is different between each other because they need to agree between these two parties the concrete practices that they need to perform. In Spain, there are different levels of organization in this kind of agreement. So at the bottom part, the lowest level is the agreement that I just mentioned between these two parties. Then we have a second level of organization with different networks according to the different territories, as you can see in the map with the colors. And at the last level, we have the national network who is trying to coordinate all these smaller networks. But why a farmer would be interested in these kind of agreements? What do they get from this kind of contracts or agreements? So it's also important to highlight that there is not a direct economic compensation, but they get an indirect economic compensation. So they receive technical advice from the land stewardship entities, not only related with the agricultural practices, but also more related with, for instance, the bureaucratic work that they need to do, or like, for instance, like finding possibilities for fundings. They also, the land stewardship entities have the goal of increasing the value of the product with different strategies. So they, per contract, they decided different strategies of how they are gonna add value to the product and benefit the farmer. And also in the contract is usually written that they need to make diffusion of the practices that the farmers are performed. And also another benefit is that they share the cost. So usually, for instance, if a farmer or the land stewardship entity consider that they need to maintain the cover crops, for instance, the land stewardship entity is the one in charge of paying for it, of paying the cost for establish this agricultural practice. Now I'm gonna go to the specific examples that I wanted to present. And is related with an association, with an environmental NGO, which is called BRINZAL. BRINZAL is an environmental NGO working mainly with the conservation of nature, but more concrete with the conservation of nocturnal birds of prey. Not since the beginning, but right now they are a land stewardship entity. And as I mentioned, they work with the conservation of these kind of birds, which are really important in terms of biodiversity because they play a key role in pest control. And in Madrid, there are different studies that relate the decrease of these birds with the abandonment of rural areas and abandonment of traditional ways of agriculture. So they have a project which is called Un mochuelo en cada olivo, and the translation is an owl or the little owl in every olive tree. They started the project in 2012 and is related, as I mentioned, with the conservation of these concrete species at the nocturnal that you all probably know because it's really common in all Europe. It's the most common nocturnal bird of prey. This species is easily visible in traditional olive orchards and vineyards because they use, for instance, the holes of the trees to make their nests there. So they started this project to turn the situation around, and they signed different agreements in the territory of Madrid with different farmers, olive oil producers, almond producers, and also vineyards, farmers with vineyards. And they created kind of a brand to identify the products of the farmer and to add the value, of course, of these kind of products. So the practices that they were including in this kind of agreements, I'm gonna do a review of these practices, of the measures. So the farmers should keep the landscape heterogeneity by leaving some areas of the plots with the natural vegetation. So in this case, for instance, the farmer was already doing this practice, but he mentioned that it's a way of being recognized by someone who is external from the production. Another practice is the farmers had to keep the cover crops within the olive groves, and they had only a few periods of the year that they could allow tillage. BRINZAL also was installed nesting boxes for nocturnal birds of prey, which actually they were putting cameras, and they were really not majority, but around half of them were used with some of these birds. They also install some poles within these natural areas, so the birds could use them. And now this picture is from one of the farmers, and his name is Juan, and he's one of the farmers who is also having one of these agreements with BRINZAL. So in this picture, he is releasing one of these little owls, because in this NGO, they also have kind of a bird recovery center, and he was also involved in these kind of activities. So I was asking him why he was taking part on these kind of agreements and why he thinks the farmers are interested on this agreement if they do not receive a direct economic compensation. The first thing he mentioned, it was because of moral issues first, but he also mentioned that it was really important that his products, the wine and the olive oil, it had a higher value by doing these practices. He was reducing the maintenance cost, and also an important thing was that the long-term sustainability of the farm by applying those practices, and also because this bird, he mentioned that is really important for him because he acted as a pest control for small mammals. That here in Madrid there is a lot of problems, for instance, with some specific rabbit. They also receive from the land stewardship entity marketing support, and he mentioned that before he was not paying attention at this part of the company. So the marketing support was an important part of all of these agreements. And he also mentioned the social recognition that he got from this process. Social recognition within the farmers and also within the consumers and the local community. Now I wanted to show you the strategy that this land stewardship entity was working with. So they decided to do a marketing support related with this label that they created to put in all the products for the farmers. So in this label appeared the name of the project and also the name of the association. And important that they mention a small explanation of the project. This sentence says that this product is produced by favorable agricultural uses for the little o. And they also had a small explanation of the project. And also, Juan mentioned that it was a good opportunity to connect with other farmers that they were doing different, similar management of the land, and to have all together this kind of this label. It was in a way they were connected, right? And they started to interact more with this project. And finally, from this case example, I wanted to show you another results that they had with this initiative. So in this year, since it started, they were involved around 265 farmers or land managers, a total of 1,400 hectares. There were different consumption groups that started to be interested on buying the product to these farmers. They installed many different nest boxes, the wooden pallets. They also created stone piles that here on the olive orchards, they are really traditional landscape elements, and they release around 107 little oats. So thank you very much.